Hey, what's up guys? So let's go ahead and take a look at the results from a bunch of radar detector testing featuring the new Uniden R7. Now this weekend, a bunch of the beta testers went out and did a bunch of testing with the R7 to see how the performance compares. You know, it's based, as we know, on the R3, and so the performance should be comparable. Plus, Uniden actually made a change to the plastic condenser lens here on the back of the detector, and so in theory, the R7 should actually have similar, if not slightly better performance than what we saw out of the R1 and the R3. And so now that we're starting to get some units in, and again, these are still beta units as I mentioned in the last video, and so there may still be some changes done, whether it's hardware or software. This is going to give us a good idea as far as what we can expect. You know, is it able to match the performance of the previous R series? Is it able to beat it? I don't know. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the results from actually 3 different tests with a bunch of different R7s against everything from Escort to Uniden, Redenso, Whistler, NetRadar, like a whole bunch of stuff, Valentine 1. So let's go ahead and hop on over to the computer and take a look at the results. Now starting off with hidden cams testing, we can go ahead and take a look at the course. You can see it's a pretty straight test course here. There's a few bends in the road like this, and there are a little bit of hills, but relatively straight for the most part. Since he was testing solo, he had his radar guns actually set up like this, hooked up to a battery pack. So here's 34.7, here's 35.5, the radar antenna up there, and here's K-band mounted down there. Next, taking a look at his results, we've got the NetRadar DSP, Uniden R7, R1, V1, Redline EX, Redenso Pro M, and Whistler CR97. He's got all the firmware versions and settings posted right here. And so starting off with 34.7, you can see we've got a lot of the detectors actually did really well here on 34.7 up front. From the rear, looks like we've got the NetRadar DSP with its rear antenna and his rear bumper, along with the R7 actually doing the best. Some of the other detectors like the V1, even though it has a rear antenna, it didn't do quite as well in the rear compared to the R7. Switching over to 35.5, it looks like NetRadar DSP, R7, and R1 are all right there in the same league, which makes sense. The NetRadar DSP is actually based on the same platform as the R3, it's just the remote version of it instead of the windshield mount. And so these results actually make sense. Now looking at some of the other detectors like the V1, Redline EX, Redenso Pro M, and Whistler, you can see those ones are definitely starting to lag behind here on 35.5, which is definitely pretty difficult to detect. Taking a look at rear detection, it definitely makes sense that the ones with the rear antennas are going to do the best, and the V1 as well does better than the single antenna detectors like this. With K-band, he was seeing less range due to the placement of the radar gun mounted lower, but as you can see, we've got K-band here for the NetRadar DSP and the R7. Definitely tougher and a little bit more variable results, but looks like the R7, it's definitely as sensitive, if not, well, actually more sensitive here than what we're seeing with the R1 and everything else. K-band from the rear was even tougher, but again, we can see that the ones with the rear antennas are doing better than the others. Now, in his thread on RDF, he also has a bunch of videos posted with everything and more information. And so if you want to take a look at, well, more info and full discussion about everything going on, definitely hop onto the forums and I'll link to his testing as well as all the other testing down in the video description so you guys can take a look there. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at some testing here on 34.7 that Duke's put together. So taking a look at his test course, it probably looks pretty familiar to a lot of you guys, but here's where we start driving. We're going to be heading this way. Here's where a lot of the alerts were. The kill zone is where the radar gun can first pick up the driver, and here is where the radar gun is mounted. Now in his test, he's comparing an R1 and an R7, and he's basically varying whether or not MRCD detection is enabled or disabled because, well, he's in Canada and they have it in use there. So taking a look here, the results are all pretty comparable. It looks like the R7 managed the longest detection, but second and third came from the R1. Averaging out the results, though, you can see they're actually right there in the same ballpark. Next, taking a look at the results with MRCD detection disabled, it looks like the R7 managed the longest detections and the R1 was just a little bit behind. It does look like there's a little bit more of a difference. It was a little over 200 feet or so, but as you can see, we're still right there in the same ballpark. So similar, if not slightly better performance here from the R7. And then scrolling down again, we've got more videos you can take a look at and discussion as well. Now for the third test, let's take a look at the results from the Texas Countermeasure testing group. They had a bunch of different detectors. As you can see, they had 2 R7s, they had an R3, an R1, a Pro M, a V1, and a Max 360. As far as their radar guns, they're testing on both 34.7 and 35.5. And then a quick point is they did angle their radar guns slightly away from the road. This was done intentionally to kind of reduce the overall range of the radar detectors because some of them, like the R7, were actually maxing out the course. And basically, instead of pointing the radar gun directly down the road, they just angled it slightly, which kind of reduces the overall power that's going down the road, and then the range that the radar detectors can get. This is a little bit different than what you'll see in the real world because police officers couldn't do this because of, well, cosine error, and they'll start getting incorrect speeds on their radar guns. But for testing purposes, it is kind of a little trick that we can do to alter things in testing. So because of that, it's technically not something that we'll see exactly done like this in the real world, but it definitely helps us see the differences between different detectors. Nevertheless, let's take a look at the results and see what they tell us. Here's a look at their test course. We're going to be driving up this direction like this, and they've got different points marked that you'll be able to see in the videos and whatnot. Here's the initial tree line, and here is the radar source. So as you can see, we've got another relatively straight testing course like this. Here's the videos if you guys would like to see the R7 in action. And here's a look at all of their results and data. Let's take a look at the graphical version just because it's a little bit easier to see, I think. So now here are the R series detectors. As you can see, we've got the R7, and then two R3s. I'm not sure if they're R3 or R1s. They're labeled here. I think he mentioned R1, so maybe a typo, but either way. Looks like the R1 and the R3 are kind of trading shots back and forth here with the R7, but either way, you can see the R7, it's doing really well. Here's the V1, the Pro M, and the Max 360 for comparison. Next, taking a look at rear detection range on 34/7, we've got the two R7s right here. Here's the Valentine 1, and here is the Max 360. In this case, yeah, it looks like the R7s are definitely more sensitive from behind. Personally, I don't think long-range rear detection is all that big of a deal. The rear antenna is primarily for arrows, but it's definitely good to know for those of you guys concerned about maybe instant-on shots with an officer driving up behind you or something. This is definitely an area that could be beneficial. Now moving on to 35/5, let's see, we've got R7, R7, and then the R3s are right there. So yeah, it looks like we do have a slight edge here with the R7s able to outrange both of the R3s, which is pretty impressive. Then behind, we've got the V1, the Pro M, and the Max 360. Then finally, taking a look at the 35/5 results from the rear, we've got the R7 and the R7, and actually really nice. We've got the Max 360 and the V1 right there. And so in this case, it looks like maybe the R7's lead isn't quite as nice with 35/5 in the rear, but even if it's only as good as the V1 or the Max 360, that's still plenty in practice. And so it's good to see actually the Max 360 and the V1 able to keep up in this situation. I do think the R7's rear did a little bit better in hidden cams tests. And so again, that's kind of one of the things where we'll see a little bit of variances from, one test or one course to another. But overall, kind of the trends that we're seeing here is, yeah, it looks like the R7 is able to either meet or exceed slightly the capabilities of the R1 and the R3, which is what I was most interested in seeing. And it looks like these results here are pretty consistent as well, which is awesome to see. So again, it's still pretty early on, but we do have a lot of data coming in, and I wanted to go ahead and share this with you guys. So for those of you looking for a radar detector with arrows, and you're looking for something with the highest level of performance, it does look like Uniden is delivered here with the new R7, which is awesome. Pros and cons to every detector, of course. Just because it has great range doesn't mean it's going to be the ultimate detector for everybody, and I still want to go into more detail about all the other things, including lockouts and BSM filtering and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all the other things that we would take a look at. But when it comes to range, if you're looking for a detector with arrows, a windshield mount specifically, well, it looks like the R7 here may actually be not only dethroning the R1 and the R3, but for those of you guys wanting the detector with arrows, yeah, good job R7. So awesome. Thanks so much for watching. Again, down in the video description, I'm going to have links to all of the testing. A big thanks to all the beta testers for going out and getting a bunch of testing done this weekend and posting the results up on the forum. And thank you to Uniden for allowing us to help get some early testing in and a little bit of beta testing to help improve the detector and ultimately just get all this information available to you guys. So yeah, again, the detectors should start shipping here. The production ones, we're kind of thinking the beginning of next month or so, and those should be the final retail ones. And of course, as we continue to get more information in, I'll continue to keep you guys posted, and there's always great stuff being posted on the forums as well. So let me know if you have any questions. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.